All right. We're at almost 400 strong. Wow. Good turnout. Way to be on top of it, everyone. This is great. Thanks for being here. We got people dropping in the chat from Ghana, Iran, Monterey, SF. This is great. We got people from all over the world. So great to be with you all. Excited to jump in and kick off MBA week. It's our first session. We have almost 3,000 people registered for MBA week, which is pretty crazy considering how many people apply to MBA programs every year. So great to have all of you. We're excited to go deeper in a bunch of different topics, and make sure you sign up for Leland. We will send out the recordings to everyone who signs up. And also we'll drop in the chat the different sessions. Make sure you register for all the different sessions you want to attend, because that's how we know who to send different resources to and the different recordings. So we'll drop some of these links in the chat. We have 3 amazing panelists here with us. We are going to try to monitor the chat. There's a lot of people here, so if we don't get your question answered, you can join our Slack community. We'll try to answer it later. You can reach out to these coaches. We'll do our best, but we'll cover as much as we possibly can. All right, let's jump in. This is MBA week 2024. We are going to cover a lot, and I would say that the way we're going to cover it is probably only at like the 3% level of everything you need to know, but there's just so much. And so, we're going to have different coaches go deep into different topics: application strategy, resumes, letters of rec, essays, of course, interviews. We're going to share a bunch of free resources, and you're going to get access to these amazing coaches for free, which is so helpful. We'll share a bunch of resources throughout the week, so make sure you come to many events, because they're all going to be unique and great in their own way. This is just a quick overview of the week we have ahead of us. So we have the kickoff session tonight. For those of you that are deferred applicants, some of you even have HBS interviews, which is great. There's an HBS interview office hours coming up right after this. And then throughout the week, we're going to go into different topics like essays, or even things like Stanford GSB office hours. We also have things like women in MBA, or a veterans MBA panel, or even strategies for non-traditional candidates. So we're going to kind of cover different pockets of folks. We're going to have topics like navigating the letter of rec, differentiating yourself, all sorts of different workshops. So we're very excited. It's going to be an awesome week. And then at the end, I'm going to do myself just an overview of the MBA application bootcamp. And so make sure you come to that if you have questions about joining the bootcamp. Many of you have already enrolled, but we'll get all the rest of your questions answered. Okay. And then just in terms of event logistics, Erica just dropped in the chat too where you can register for each individual session. So make sure you do that. You can ask questions in the chat. We'll do our best to answer. RSVP for each of those sessions. If you join the events live, we're going to do giveaways for the bootcamp and other things. So like tonight, we're going to raffle off a free bootcamp slot, and Nick can drop the link in the chat, but we're going to talk about that a little bit later. And then make sure you sign up. So I don't want to go too deep into logistics. I know you guys are ready to jump in and hear from our panel. We'll just do some quick introductions, and then we'll spend most of our time tonight on the expert panel, which is going to be great. So I'm John. I'm the CEO of Leland. I went to Stanford and was admitted to Harvard, and now run Leland. I also do some coaching, but mostly focused on making Leland the best possible platform to help you in your different goals. We now coach for a number of different things. MBA is our bread and butter, but we do 50 other categories across career, test prep, and other educational goals. So that's my day job. You'll also see Erica, Amelia, Josh, and other Leland team members in the chat dropping resources and other things. So be on the lookout for those emails. Huge shout out to those 3. This week takes so much time and effort to plan and coordinate. So big thank you to them for making that possible. And now I'm going to kick it over to our panelists to do their introductions. We'll start with Tim, and then jump to Chaz, and then Keta.
Cool. Hey everyone, I'm Tim Fenton. Super excited to be here with all of you today. So my background, I started my career at Goldman Sachs, and then I got my MBA at Chicago Booth. While I was at Booth, I was an admissions fellow, so very involved in the admissions process, and did many admissions interviews while I was on campus. And then I've been doing admissions consulting pretty much ever since. So for several years now, and have helped folks get into like almost basically every top 20 school, M7 over and over, of course, as well as some international schools. So super excited to be here today.
Go
Yeah.
for it.
Hey, everybody. My name's Chaz Foote. On the kind of professional side, I went to the University of Utah for my undergrad, spent a lot of my career in the investment management space, and then went to Stanford GSB for my MBA. Currently working kind of small business acquisition and micro cap private equity. On the coaching side, I've kind of coached throughout my life in a variety of different things for career and MBA. I was kind of in at the very start of Leland and have been coaching on the platform really since its inception, specializing primarily in MBA candidates. Really enjoy it. Have had some great outcomes kind of across the M7, but particularly have had some good outcomes at Harvard and Stanford with candidates from all different backgrounds. So excited to answer questions tonight, and thanks for letting me join.
Awesome. And then I'm Keta. I'm coming to you from New York. And in terms of my background, I went to Dartmouth undergrad, studied random things, Portuguese and religion, and then worked at 2 Fortune 100 companies, Kraft Heinz and Carnival Cruise Line, before going to HBS. And I realized that I was doing a lot of consulting for friends, helping them with interviews, essays, all of that good stuff. And someone's like, well, why don't you just become a coach? And so that's what I did. I would say my specialty is in helping you shine, especially if you have sort of a non-traditional background and you're not sure how you could be a fit. We'll work together on showing you that not only are you a good fit, but you're what these programs actually need. So I'm excited to share more and learn more from the fellow panelists today.
I love it. Okay, this is great. So as you can see, we have a rock star lineup. Excited to learn from you guys. We'd love to hear from you. This is going to probably be overwhelming considering we have almost 500 people on this call. But if you can drop in the chat, you already did this, so you guys are already ahead of us. But where are you dialing in from? Where are you working or studying if you're still in school, or if if you're already in your career, and then what's your dream MBA program? Drop it in the chat. It's always fun to just see where everyone comes from and what everyone's up to. We'll see who's the furthest away. We got some Brazil there, data analytics, Canada, New York, Peru, the Philippines. It's pretty awesome. Yeah, we have customers from all over the world. It's really cool to see all of you show up. I don't even want to know what time of day it is where many of you are, but you've already passed that test. You want it. This is awesome. I can't even read. This is coming so fast. 1 a.m. Nice. Mexico City. Cool. We'll let those trickle in. We'll keep rolling. What a great group. Thanks for being here. I know there's nothing more we'd love to do than talk about MBAs on our Monday evening or middle of the night. All right. Just to give you a quick overview of Leland, I know many of you are already working with coaches or come to our events, but just for those of you who haven't, we're building the one-stop shop to help you reach your most ambitious goals by connecting you with amazing coaches like this. Who will work one-on-one with you, or you can come to different events and learn from them. And we also have a library of content called Leland Plus that has hundreds of sample essays and resumes and other resources, videos on different topics. You can even do a free trial if you want to try out Leland Plus. It's awesome. We've tried to make it as affordable as possible. So check that out. I think some of these coaches have even created content for that. So definitely check that out. We also do courses or boot camps. Our MBA boot camp for the year starts June 24th. We'll talk a little bit more about this later, so I'm not going to go too much into depth on it. But it's going to be an awesome event series and kind of packed in so much of what we've learned over the last several years into this boot camp. So we'll talk about it a little bit later. The most important thing that we do is help people like yourself. We want your faces to be on this next year. We could probably make 30 different slides of these. It's our favorite thing, celebrating the stories of our customers. I think it's probably why most of the coaches coach, is they love working with you specifically. We actually just last week started to print out some of these faces and stories and put them on our office wall because it's so special. So we hope that you're next. We hope that you're sending us that celebratory text when you get in. And I hope you believe that you can do it because they are scary and intimidating processes, but they're definitely attainable. I got this email last year. It's like one of my favorite emails. someone that was a first gen applicant who got into HBS, worked with a coach named Andy, and his family's life is forever changed. So I think that these things are really, they're really personal. They're really stressful processes. I think before we even get into it, I hope you know that you can do it. Hope you believe in yourself. These are, this is attainable, and we're here to help and want to be there for you every step of the way. So that's Leland. Let's jump in to the meat of this application panel and go deeper on some things. So when you approach an MBA application, this isn't even everything, but there's a lot. You have to take the test. You have to figure out how to differentiate yourself from all the other talented candidates. There's way more talented people than there are available spots. You have to figure out, how am I going to select the right recommenders, and how am I going to prepare them so they do a good job? And we'll drop this later, but there's like recommender prep docs you can use. And then of course you get into all the extracurriculars, awards and honors. Most of us are like, I've never gotten a trophy. Like, what is that? Or like, some sort of special award. How do I even think about that section? Resume. And then of course there's, if you're applying to even 3 schools, you're probably writing close to 10 essays. So there's just a lot of things. And then, even once you do all of that and submit, you have the interview to wrap it up. I'm curious, as you guys look at this list and really the other parts of the application process I didn't even touch on, what part feels the most daunting to you? You can just drop it in the chat. Helps us to kind of get a feel for where everyone's at. For me personally, we get a lot of tests, a lot of essay. For me personally, it was the letters of rec. I always felt like I couldn't control that process, and I wanted to control it. That strategy, letters of rec, undergrad grades. Yeah, there's all sorts of questions. All right, pretty big mix. We'll just let that trickle in. What we're going to cover, this is important. We are not going to be able to go as deep into all of these that we would like to, but the coaches will give you kind of some general things to think about. And the goal for this session is to kind of shrink the box of your unknown unknowns. And so you now can figure out like, oh, this is a thing. And here's how I might approach a letter of rec prep doc, or here's how I might think about essays. So come to the rest of the sessions if you want to go deeper, or join the boot camp. But we're going to cover as much as we can tonight. So let's jump into the panel and kick things off. Maybe we'll go to you, Keta, for this first question, but there's like, so many things out there. What are MBA programs actually looking for? And as they kind of approach this process, how should they think about kind of the application strategy or fitting everything together throughout their application? I'm curious to just get your thoughts. I know that this is a big question.
That's a big question. That is, I think first thing to know is that it differs by school. So the first piece of advice I always have is do your research. Start to read as much as you can about the different schools, because while in general, they're going to be prioritizing things like leadership, analytical acumen, and teamwork. And that's probably 3 things that are going to be similar across all schools. The way that they might like you to demonstrate that could be different. I would say in terms of how candidates can demonstrate these qualities throughout their application, that's why I'm such a big proponent of a holistic application. I think when I was applying to business schools back in the day, I was thinking about, okay, the essay. How do I show everything about myself in these 300, 500, 800 words? But if you take a step back, you realize that, like John mentioned, there are so many components: the letters of recommendation, your resume, the essay, short answer questions, extracurriculars, where you can give all of the admissions committee kind of a little look into who you are. And so you should think about how all of these different components can help be little chapters that tell your overall story of the candidate that you are.
I love that. Chaz, you were nodding. Anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to frame it. And that's a lot of what I do in my coaching. But one interesting way to frame this, and this was told to me by the former dean of admissions at Stanford, is she used to look at applications kind of like an annual report, or like a 10K, if you're familiar with that from a investments perspective. And she said, I read the document and I try to think about what you've done and I forecast it forward. So if you want to have leadership shine through in that report, and she's looking for leaders in the future, you're more likely to get in than not. So I think that's an interesting framework. But within that, thinking about it holistically and making sure different pieces of you come out in different pieces of the application is hugely important. So, +1 to that comment.
I love that. That's great. Tim, anything you'd add?
Maybe just a couple thoughts. I think one is there's a lot of things that applicants highlight, and I think being thoughtful about like what your personal brand is, like what's your unique differentiator as an applicant, and like what's something that will stick with them 24 hours after they read your application, and sort of doing that homework. We're going to talk about the strategy in a second, but just doing that homework up front, I think is pretty important. And then maybe like the one area I would touch on to add is just from a career perspective, what they're looking for. Um, and I think a big part of it is a really cohesive narrative between what you've done, what skills and experiences you've had in your past, and then sort of why you need an MBA to achieve your immediate and long-term goals. They'll ask like, why do you need an MBA? Why can't you just go do it right now yourself? And then that will feed into like why the school and so much of the rest of the application. So I think getting that career narrative really tight and cohesive is really important.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, great. I know that's a very big question. We're going to jump into a couple specific things. What about timeline? I know that especially for folks that are applying to lots of schools, Tim, maybe we'll go back to you for this one. How do you recommend, like, well, first of all, what is the general timeline? We did this now purposely like a little bit earlier in the season, but we're starting to get into it, right? It's now is like the time if you're applying this year. Curious how you would approach the timeline for folks that are thinking about applying to 2 to 5, 7 schools.
Yeah, it's a great question. So what I would say is there's a ton of moving parts like in each application. And then when you layer on multiple applications at the same time, it gets very complex. I have like an Excel that I give my clients. If any of you are interested, shoot me a message and I'll share it with you. But basically, my recommendation and what this Excel does is start from the deadline. So for round one, deadlines typically in September timing, and then just sort of work your way back on, when do the essays need to be, totally finalized. So when do you need to have like a 90% draft? So when do you need to have a first draft? And then sort of getting your recommenders ready. Are your recommenders going to share the content with your coach to get feedback and sort of, is this the first MBA recommendation they've ever written? And they could use some advice on what looks good. So like, when do you need to reach out to them to sort of get them engaged and share that upfront packet? Same, your resume, like you could sort of start to piece all of the different pieces of the application working backwards across all of the different schools to make sure you're starting early enough and whether you're on time sort of as you go throughout the whole process.
That's great. Keta, anything you would add in terms of like, maybe like when to tackle certain parts like the test or recommendations, some of these other things that come into play?
Yeah, I would say that for a lot of people, the test is really scary, and that was for me included. Um, I was someone who loved to procrastinate in my work life, and it served me pretty well. But for tests, you can't procrastinate too much because you just can't stuff it all in. So I would say consider what you think are going to be your biggest roadblocks. And that's where a coach comes in handy because you might know that the GMAT or the GRE is something you need to put aside time for. But what you might be surprised about is that letter of recommendation, for example, might take some time. You might think I know my boss really well and the other recommender I'm going to ask, but actually people get really busy. And when you need them to do something for you on your timeline, you need to make sure to factor in a few extra months normally to actually get things done in the way you'd like. So I would say that's where a coach really comes in handy to help you understand maybe the essay is not going to take you as long as you think, but where it's going to take you longer is the short answer questions because, hey, there's that word limit and you're going to need to revise and revise and revise down to get into that word limit. So I would say the test is obviously a big component, but then considering what might be the unexpected roadblocks, just like any sort of project management where you're like, hey, if this is not done, what does that mean for, the next step? And that's how I like to think about it. But everything Tim said.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Chaz, maybe we'll go over to you for this one. How do you think about, and I think you mentioned this a little bit with the leadership comment, but like how do you think about creating an application strategy or kind of helping someone shine through or kind of come across well in that forecasting forward? How do you think about that?
Yeah. So I think I break up strategy into two parts. There is the test and your grades, and there is everything else. And I strongly recommend having the test done and just getting as high a score as possible before you dive into the teeth. One thing that most of my clients drastically underestimate is the amount of reflection and headspace it takes to create a coherent application strategy. And so more specifically, how do you actually create an application strategy? In my mind, it requires a lot of reflection, thinking through things like, who am I? What are my core values? When have I demonstrated these core values? Who do I look up to, and why do I look up to them? What do I want to do in the future, and how is an MBA going to help me get there? Brainstorming these questions, thinking about it, coming to an answer is really important. After that, I like to plot out the 3 to 5 kind of core values or core themes that you want to have in your application in a grid. And on the other side of the grid, you have each of those pieces that you laid out, John, at the start. And then we think through, okay, if I want hardworking and persistent to come out, that's probably better to come out in a resume than in an essay. If you want empathetic or something, a little bit maybe softer, that's something that might come out better in an essay than in a resume. And all of that plays into how you think about each individual piece of the application. So the actual questions you're asking yourself to create that reflection can differ, but ultimately you want to arrive at a few themes that are important to come across the entirety of all the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I love that. Super helpful. I think it's interesting to think about, to summarize, like you need to communicate to them who you are and why it should matter to them. And also obviously be thinking about why it should matter to them, because it's going to matter in the world. And so I really like that framing. Maybe one question we get a lot of, maybe Kato, you can answer this or give your perspective on it, is should people be thinking about this across schools super differently, like a little bit differently? Like should they frame themselves for Harvard, in a different way than for Booth or Stanford or whatever? Or is it sort of like an exercise in just showing who you are and maybe tweaking it here or there? How do you think about that?
I think the most honest answer is it depends on how much time you have and how much you care. Because you're probably either in school if you're doing a 2+2 application, or you're working full time if you're applying for school, and it's just like an extra job. So I think while ideally you would probably have some core themes, and then you're really going to work to apply them to each school. Sometimes, depending on the school, you can do tweaks here or there, versus in other schools like GSB, for example, they have a really specific format that they like to see things, and you're going to want to make sure that you've optimized your application for that. Same with HBS, same with, for example, Ross, which has a real strong focus on teamwork. So I think while those core values are probably ones that can help you across the applications, the school research shouldn't be underestimated, because one, it helps you understand how you're going to come across and what the admissions committee is looking for, but two, it also helps you understand if the school would actually be a good fit for you. And that's why so many coaches will recommend that, in addition to doing a little bit of research around the schools, which we probably already know, we want you to get to know the school and might want you to talk to a few alums to see if that's really somewhere you could see yourself, and somewhere you could see yourself spending time for 2 years, investing in, and all of that. So I would say core values, yes, they're probably going to take you across a few applications, but depending on the school and how specific their application is, then you might do a little bit more.
Yeah, I love that. I totally agree. Okay, let's go into resume, which don't zone out here, people. Like, resume matters a lot, and I know many of you got fancy jobs with that resume, and it's probably in a decent shape, but they are a little bit different, and what MBA programs care about can be a little bit different and especially if you have a very technical job. But maybe Tim, we'll go to you for this one. How do you kind of take a typical job resume and sort of tailor it or think about it in what MBA programs are looking for?
Yeah. So a couple thoughts here. One is with the resume, but with every piece of the application, right? You just need to know your audience and think about it from their perspective. And so that will highlight like what the biggest differences need to be between a really solid MBA resume and a regular job resume. Like if you're in a fairly technical field, there's probably a lot of language on your resume that is sort of table stakes in your industry, and like the admissions committee is just not gonna, they're not gonna be able to digest it. And I think part of knowing your audience too is just thinking through the fact that they are reviewing so many of these. You really need to make it as easy as possible for the specific things that they're looking for. And when you think about your strategy, the specific things you want to highlight, to come off the page, very easily. So I would say like order matters of the bullets, in terms of like showing them what they're looking for very early in your resume, as well as like order even within each of the specific bullets of like, the diversity of the action words, which activities you want to highlight, and then how you sort of tailor it to this unique new audience. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of starting with it and maybe that's something that I should just ask you guys too, is like, what are some of those examples of what they care about? I think the first that comes to mind is obviously, as mentioned, leadership, and that can be hard when you only have like a year of experience or just internships, but kind of a pattern of being an initiator. They obviously care about your education involvement and what you did on campus, because you would be going to their campus. So if you've been involved in clubs and other activities, they might associate that with someone that's going to be involved in clubs and activities on their campus. But I'm curious, Keta or Chaz or Tim, are there any other things that you guys would call out that like specifically MBA programs might care about more than they certainly care less about, like, your ability to write good SQL code or, whatever it is. But what do they care more about?
Maybe just one, John, to sort of build on your leadership point. One thing that comes to mind is I think part of it is just a trajectory, right? And I think from a professional perspective, oftentimes it's like how your professional skills have grown. I think here it's like, what did you study? How has that fed into what you've done? What skills have you developed like throughout your career? And then how does that feed into your broader MBA career narrative? Like looking at it through that lens is super important.
I guess I would also say that for resumes, something that was hard for me when I was thinking about resumes, and something that's hard for clients, to your point, is like removing that jargon. You're probably going to take 3 passes at removing whatever industry speak you normally have. I came from consumer goods, so there's a lot of Nielsen scan data, all these specific things that I would talk about, MBOs, KP, like all those things that seem nice and are good for meetings at work are not good for somebody who wants to be lazy and understand what kind of impact you can make, no matter if you work here, there, or there. And I think the other piece I would say in your resume, which should be in your job resume anyway, but often isn't, is quantifying everything, right? Try to have an impact associated with everything. That's something that your coach can help you work through. Say, for example, you don't know that you improve something by 80%, we can get to a number together so that you can have an estimated impact, but quantifying everything you do is so important. They don't want to know that you were a manager of marketing. They want to know what you did as a manager of marketing and what you were able to accomplish. So I think that's super important. And last, Tim alluded to this, but having a lot of action words is super important. So it might seem kind of boring, but instead of being part of a team that worked to do something, you were the point person on the team that drove the implementation of X, Y, and Z projects, leading to a reduction in costs by 30%. And all of a sudden, I get what you did, no matter if you did it in the military, no matter if you did it as an engineer or as, in PR. And so I think that's really important. And yeah, the resume is something you won't want to spend time on, but is really important to spend time on.
I love it.
John, maybe just one thing to add there. All this is totally spot on, but I think what takes it even to the next level is making things relative, right? You want to say, I was the top performing analyst in my class, first of 21, or 30% cost reduction, which was the best in the history of the company. Like that adds the next layer, because a lot of times quantifying is really good, but it's hard to contextualize the numbers unless it's on a relative basis for the AdCom.
Yeah, that's a great addition. Yeah, even in terms of like how many people were hired for that role and how many people were interviewed, that I think that's great. You have to help them if it's impressive, help them understand why it's impressive. That's great. Those are all really good suggestions. Thank you, guys. Okay, let's go into recommendations briefly. I know there's so much to talk about here, but maybe we'll go back to you, Chaz. Like, how do you think about the role that recommendations play in the application process? And how do you kind of help clients think about that or prepare for it?
They can move the needle massively. I mean, when I remember the first, second sentence after I got a call saying I got into school, the admissions professional told me your letters of recommendation were really strong and we were impressed by that. So they can be the difference between getting in and not, frankly. how they fit into the broader application. So we talked about the resume and kind of the importance of relative performance. We've talked about the strategy and bringing out your core values and what you want to do. There is an element of being kind of humble and focused during a lot of that. The recommendation is the piece of the puzzle where someone else can tell the admissions committee that you are fantastic, you deserve to get in, and that you are one of the best people they've ever worked with. So this is like the biggest opportunity that you have basically to brag on your behalf without you saying it. Recommenders can also highlight pieces of your personality that you just can't without coming across as arrogant or someone that, you know, wouldn't be fun to work with. And so they can provide a different message. They can provide a stronger message. And then lastly, you know, we also talked about what business schools like, leadership, teamwork, et cetera. They can speak to those things more effectively than really any other piece of the application. The schools often request a direct supervisor to be one of the two recommenders. And so they also get, you know, a kind of a different lens of what it's like to work with you directly. So those are some things, John. I don't know if you want me to go into kind of what makes a strong letter of recommendation, but that's the broader overview of how they fit in my view.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's super helpful. Maybe we'll go over to Keta and just get your thoughts on like, maybe any other thoughts on like what does make a good recommendation, and then Tim, we'll have you kind of talk through how to best prepare a recommender and make sure they do a good job. So Keta.
Yeah, so I think in terms of what makes a good recommendation, you should definitely look for someone that you've actually worked with to be your recommender. For example, I had someone I was advising who thought that maybe because he had spoken with the CEO of the company, that could be a potential good recommender, and he worked at a pretty large company. So in that case, probably not, because the CEO isn't really working with you day to day and can't speak directly to as a leader. I think the best recommendations don't just say that you're great, that you're a leader, that you're fantastic. They come with specific stories and examples to share how and why that happened. And so that's why the recommendation prep packets that John was alluding to are so important, because sometimes you need to spark someone's memory, right? We don't remember all the things we did at work or the things that maybe the person we're managing did at work. And so that's why it's really important to do that self-reflection, to remember those stories, so that your recommenders are best equipped to help you, so that they can say, hey, they were a fantastic leader because we had this project, and you know, they weren't technically in the lead, but they took a leadership position by organizing this meeting, by having pre-meetings to get everyone's consent, by doing all of these pieces, and in that way they demonstrated they were a leader. I think also where recommendations can be uniquely helpful is if there's a gap you feel you need to address in your holistic application. Say you, for example, had a non-quantitative background in undergrad, and maybe your role at work doesn't say that you're in finance or something super quantitative, and maybe even your GMAT score in the quant section is okay but not fantastic. That is where a recommender can say, hey, I actually worked with this person, you, on this project that was really analytical in nature, and this is how they broke it down. I was so impressed because not only did they teach themselves Microsoft Excel and analytics and whatever, but they also used statistics to do this, and by the way, they actually did it better than somebody who had that background. So that's where the power of a recommendation can really come through. So again, something that your coaches can help you work with. If you're not sure what story to highlight, that's something that like I would be there for as a coach, so that we can figure out how that recommendation should complement the rest of your application.
Yeah, there are so many good points in there. I think it's definitely, like, to underscore this letter needs to be table thumping. And if you just met the CEO one time, they're not going to do that. No. And the funny thing is, like, the schools they come to you and try to frame it as like, hey, Keta, like, tell us how they really are. Like, give us a little evaluation, inside scoop. And if they don't know you well enough and know that this isn't an evaluation, this is a recommendation, then they might try to be like honest with the school. And of course, they're trying to be honest. You want them to be honest, but you want them to be really honest in a really favorable way. Otherwise, you'll pick someone else, right? Like, this isn't like a assigned person. This can be someone that you choose. And so picking that person is so important. And then, yeah, to all your other points, those are super helpful. And I think those specific examples, to your point, makes a world of a difference. Instead of just saying, Tim is hardworking, really illustrating that and rounding you out as a candidate. Super helpful. Tim, let's go into some of the preparation and just we've alluded to this recommender prep doc thing a couple of times. How do you kind of help your clients prepare their
Sure.
recommender?
Yeah. So I would say there's really like three things you need to give them to help them prepare. One is like an expectation around the timeline, what they need to do and when, right? A second is how their recommendation is going to fit into this broader strategy that you're developing. Like, what are the specific things that you need them to hit on? To Kata's point, right? If there are weaknesses or certain points that you want them to emphasize, you want to be clear about how it's fitting into the broader narrative. And then the third is what good looks like. So this could be somebody that feels really strongly about you, but they don't have a ton of experience writing recommendations for top schools, right? And so, as we've talked about several times now, we recommend that you give your recommender a packet that has information about all three of those things. And that will help them get started, understand the expectations, and give them a sense of what good looks like. But I would also, advise that it doesn't stop there. I think how well they sort of ingest that information and then it flows through to the recommendation. To one of the earliest points John made on this call about feeling nervous is like this is the one thing that's sort of out of your control. There are ways to sort of help manage that. So to the extent that you feel comfortable in your relationship with this person, you can share that you're working with a coach, and as a sort of independent third party, I can work directly with them or any of the coaches, right? Work directly with them, provide feedback, help even prompt them, well, if you would feel comfortable saying the same thing but saying it in this way, it would make the recommendation a lot stronger. So sort of, there's a lot of opportunity to help control that narrative, to make your recommendation a lot stronger, and that will flow through to your entire application. So
Yeah, that's such an important point. Like, don't feel like you can't control it. You certainly can influence it in a significant way. And there's really clever ways of doing that. So that's awesome. Super helpful. I just looked, we're almost at 500 people on this call. This is awesome. Great turnout. Great to have all of you here. We'll just do a quick break and I'll talk to you about the boot camp. This is going to be, I'm so excited about this boot camp. We've been working on this for months and months, really years. It's kind of a collection of a lot of our best sessions we've ever taught, pooled together and our best resources and taught by different coaches. We're actually, you can actually win a free slot to this boot camp, and we'll talk through some of the sessions through this bit.ly link. So we're gonna announce that on this call. So some of you will actually get a free slot in the boot camp. Definitely, you can enter to win here. Just to kind of give you a quick overview of some of the sessions. So the first session will be kind of a deep dive into foundations. And again, this bootcamp is different from MBA week. It's actually focused on real progress. So you're going to leave with like more of an application that you can use and submit, or at least work with your coach on. I'm teaching a class on the letter of recommendation packet. We're going to actually go through specific examples of recommendations that got people in, and then actually work on those packets together. And then you can kind of go on and continue to work on those. We have former admissions officers at Harvard, Stanford, and Wharton teaching different sessions. Tim's actually teaching our M7 MBA essays session. We have office hours with all of these M7 coaches. So we're actually running one of these on the management consulting side and have about 90 people in it. It's been an amazing experience so far. This course includes, 10 hours of live instruction, lots of different interactive activities. We'll even give you free interview prep if you actually get an interview. We're obviously going to be there ready to answer your questions and go deeper with many of you. If you were to buy this all piecemeal, it would be, almost $5,000. But this tonight only, we're giving everyone, we usually price it at $1,200. We're giving everyone a $500 discount, and you can get it for $699 tonight. If you put your information into this to win the boot camp, the free admission to the boot camp, we'll actually send you that discount code. We'll text you. You can get all of your questions answered tonight. Me and other folks on the team are here to just kind of text back and forth tonight to make sure you get all your questions answered. But we would love to have you there. And definitely can't emphasize enough how valuable this will be. So make sure you sign up for that. And that's our end of our commercial break. Sorry, we had to put it in there because it's going to be so valuable, and I really I don't want you to miss out on it. So let's shift gears and talk about essays. There's obviously a lot to unpack with essays, and we could spend, we are going to spend 4 unique sessions in the boot camp talking about essays. So there's going to be a lot that we go deeper on. But as maybe we'll go to you, Chaz, and just get your thoughts. Like, how do you recommend people start preparing or kind of thinking about brainstorming for their essays? Do you just write it all out and kind of word vomit onto a page? Do you outline it? Like, how do you recommend people do it?
Yeah. I alluded to the painful process of reflection earlier, and that can help generate a lot of things. So I talked about the grid and sort of coming to different conclusions on the values. After doing that, the next thing I typically have my clients do is write out prompts to certain questions in a story format. So tell me about a time when you worked with someone who influenced you. What was one of the most difficult experiences of your life? Tell me about your biggest achievement. And those types of questions start to get the wheels turning. I typically like to talk to my clients about those stories, and then, start to kind of piece things out. In my mind, there is the hardest essay to write of any business school essay you will write is the what matters most to you and why prompt, which is Stanford GSB's prompt. And you have to answer that question in roughly 650 words. And so after doing the kind of storytelling pieces, I typically try to have my clients write that essay to the best of their abilities, knowing that it's probably going to be pretty bad and clunky off the bat, and that's okay. But getting something on paper first, after getting the wheels turning, can be really helpful. So, the kind of crappy first draft is an important part of this process, and probably the most painful and time-consuming part of the essay writing process.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, that's super helpful. Keta, anything else you would add to that?
I would say similarly, it starts with a lot of questions and answers, and we kind of, as coaches, typically force you to put it into some sort of example or story framework. That way we have something to work with and something to start with. But I think that's where a good coach can also help to draw out things that maybe you're not hearing. A lot of our job is listening and really active listening. And that's why, even though you might have done a preparation document, answering some questions, and then we might take time on a call and you're helping us walk through those questions, and you're like, didn't you prepare? And we're like, yes, we read it, but we want to hear what comes out when you maybe say it out loud versus just on paper. And I think that depending on schools, again, this is where the focus on different schools happens. We might want to focus on different things. For example, Fuqua, which is Duke's program, has this 25 things about me, and that is an essay, even though it's not an essay. So all of this pre-work, although you might not think that you're going to use it, it probably comes out in some part of the application. And when it comes to the essay specifically, I would say getting a draft or 2 down on paper is most important. Your first draft is going to be bad, and that's okay, but it's just really hard to get started. So get started, try something. If you have a story that you feel like needs to get out, you can start to try to write it. And if you think it's not answering the questions you need to, we can work through that. But I would say getting started, picking a theme or 2 that your coach could help you through, is the most important piece, because you want to have a draft so that you can get feedback and thoughts on it. And I would say the other piece I would have is that you want your essay to be able to tell a story about you that somebody that doesn't know you is going to understand. And that's often one of the most difficult things to get over, right? You want to tell somebody something, but you're like acting like you're telling your friend, but instead you need to act like you're telling a stranger about yourself, and they should be able to get to who you are from reading that the way that a friend might. And so I think that's the kind of, at the end of this whole process, after you've prepared, that's the goal, is that somebody who doesn't know you at all can read this essay and get a sense of who you are. And that's when you know that it's ready to go.
That's awesome. Super helpful. Okay, Tim, we're gonna go over to you for this one. What are some of the common mistakes or pitfalls that people make as they kind of go through this application process? either in essays or in other parts of the application?
Yeah, so probably the number one thing that I see is folks maybe aren't aware of sort of the white space, like what they aren't seeing in their profile or in their application. And they may try to control for that by like asking friends or their girlfriend who got into Kellogg, or like whoever, they feel like they can ask to get that feedback. So I would say like my biggest recommendation is to like be thoughtful about sort of the feedback that you're getting. And don't, like, I think you run a real risk in sort of trying to do the entire thing by yourself, just that you may not realize exactly what they're looking for or what good looks like. And so I think it can be helpful to get high quality feedback along the way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super helpful.
John, maybe just like, sorry, just like one point to add to that is like, I have had a lot of clients who will come to me after they apply to a couple schools in one round. They felt really good about it and then got rejected. And then when we sit down and look at it together, there's like tons of opportunity to sharpen it or better tailor it to what the admissions committee was looking for. And then we work together on future applications. So I think there's just an opportunity to sort of get it right the first time. Yeah.
Yeah, we do a lot of like ding analysis where someone comes in and says, "Hey, I applied without help this first round. Like, what happened?" And it's like, oh man, there's like so many things that you don't think about, which is why you work with someone, and that's really the reason for doing the boot camp, to kind of give you a foundation. And then we have a lot of folks that will go work with coaches, and you'll just kind of avoid some of these common things that exist. By the way, I'll just stay. We have like a million questions about the bootcamp in the chat. I'm going to stay on for about 10 minutes after, and I'll just answer questions. We'll make sure everyone gets everything squared away. Chaz, and then we'll go to Keta. What other common mistakes do you see in kind of the application process?
Time management's the biggest one in my mind. Not leaving enough time to do certain things. Keta mentioned this at the start, but every single school has all these very short answer questions that are extraordinarily time consuming. Like, what was your most challenging part of your job? Explain that in 150 characters. And you have to do that over and over and over again. And you look at the application with a week to go, and it's very difficult to answer those questions thoughtfully in that short amount of time. The same goes for the amount of reflection required to get the essays done. And the same goes just for the essay writing process. In my mind, you kind of have to be superhuman to get coherent applications together in less than like 2 months. And the other thing, John, too, is just applying to too many schools. I'm a pretty like staunch supporter of applying to no more than 3 schools per round, and don't work with anyone who's doing more than that, because I think you just sacrifice quality by spreading yourself too thin.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. If nothing else, like go home and open up the application like that. They can just see everything. I think that's great, and totally agree on quality over quantity and just spraying it around. Keta, what else would you add?
I would say some simple things. So one caveat I would have with the 3 schools rule, Chaz, is if you're applying through the consortium, because people might not know about it. It might be something that you research and it could be right for you, but there's an application and kind of a group called the consortium, and that might be a way if you really do have a lot of schools that are a target, but you're short on time, a way to apply to multiple. But I do agree overall that you shouldn't try to spray and pray. I would say common mistakes are literally like having the wrong school's name in the application, and you'd be surprised how much that happens if you were short on time and copy pasted something. So it's having somebody look over it, having yourself look over it, printing out your application, even though it's not super eco-friendly, and reading through it to see what basic mistakes you could be making that just make it seem like you don't care about what you're doing. And then I think the other piece is, some school applications are going to have a section for a resume. They're also going to have a section for job descriptions. And if you don't know, kind of like what Tim was talking about, you might think that you can just copy and paste your resume into the job description section. But a coach would tell you, these are 2 different sections and they should be treated differently. And hey, we have to have a strategy for both. So I think not knowing what you don't know is a little bit tough. not having time, and then just like the simple errors of make sure you have the right school, make sure you allude to the right values that you research for that school. And especially if you're copying and pasting stuff, it just happens to the best of us, especially if you're short on time and it's midnight and the application is due the next day or something. So I think those are some easy things to make sure you don't do.
It's great. Thank you guys. Super helpful. We only have a couple more questions left, and then we're trying to answer as many questions as we can in the chat. There's obviously a lot, so come to the other session. Stay after a little bit if you want to get some questions answered. And we are about to pick the boot camp raffle winner, so we'll drop the link in the chat for one final call for that. But let's do maybe Tim, would love to get your thoughts, like for folks that feel generic or overrepresented. How do they stand out? For our consultants or investment bankers out there, who, by the way, there's a lot of them at all of these top programs. Like, how do they stand out against the competition?
Yeah, it's a great question. Having spent like half a decade at BCG, I have helped a lot of BCGers apply to M7 schools and get admitted. And this question comes up like every time. Like one thing I would point to is actually something Chaz mentioned earlier, which is that soul searching and sort of deep thought about what you bring that's differentiated and how you are different actually like really matters. So I would say, as somebody who's reviewed a ton of applications, you can actually, as an evaluator, like you can feel or get a sense pretty quickly of like how thoughtful the applicant has been versus if it's just sort of like going through all the motions. And so thinking about like your authentic story, like I promise you are unique, right? Like and you've had unique experiences that would be incredibly valuable like inside the class profile. But really spending some time thinking about those experiences and how you've grown, and even areas that you lack and like still need to grow, and how you're hoping to pursue an MBA, to achieve those things, and then having that come through really clearly in the application narrative. That's really the ticket to standing out.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, I'm curious, maybe Keta, we'll go to you for this one. How do you overcome weaknesses or gaps like a low GPA or like less professional experience or a lower test score? How do you recommend people approach that?
I think there are a few ways to approach it. One is, so say you have a low undergrad GPA, acing the test as much as you can is a great way to show that you've changed. Same with if your work history aligns with maybe your GPA showed that you were a little bit of a slacker in undergrad, but your work history and your resume shows that you're a super dedicated employee and you go above and beyond, because not only are you doing your job super well, you're also involved in an employee ERG group or something. Again, it kind of comes back to this idea of creating that holistic application. Some things that some of my mentees have done is say your quant score was really low, and you came from a not super analytical undergrad, you might take a small finance or accounting class before school starts, and you say that you're planning to do that to show that you're kind of meeting that gap and you're closing it halfway before school even starts. In terms of limited professional experience,
I'm going down. You guys go. Oh, are you not going down?
That's one where you'd want to make sure that school really is right for you right now, but there are a lot of ways to speak to what you're going to do and what perspective you can bring in the classroom. And I would say another piece that people don't think about and we haven't talked about yet is extracurriculars. And often I really suggest to go deep rather than, depth rather than breadth. Admissions committees don't want to see that you're involved in like a million different things. They want to see that you did one or two things really well and consistently throughout your time. So that's another place where if you're really involved in an organization or something that you're super passionate about, it helps again to show this consistency that could be lacking in other parts of your application.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Okay, we are approaching time. We're going to do a quick 15-second last piece of advice from you guys. You've dropped so much valuable information already. I know it's impossible to cover everything. Chaz, we're going to go to you, and then Keta, and then Tim, bring us home.
Be thoughtful and believe that you can get in.
Do your homework, be excited, and stay the course of your timeline.
I would say, again, think about your audience. Everything should be through the lens of the admissions committee. And then, like, I hate to say this, but honestly, just like try to enjoy it. I felt like the experience was, it was really fun for me, and I learned a lot about myself. And I wish I could do it again. Like, I know that sounds stupid, but that, I mean, that's why I do this. But honestly, it can be a really cool experience. So
That's
yeah,
a
sorry to end with that, John, but
No, that's good. Yeah, enjoy the process. I think it's excellent. So we're gonna make sure you enter the giveaway if you haven't already. We'll drop the link in one more time. We'll raffle off one tonight. I just got slacked the winner of tonight, so don't drop yet. I'm gonna give away one more at least, and I'm gonna announce that at my session on Friday. So make sure you register for that. It's bit.ly/winmba. Can we show some love to all of these panelists in the chat? This was so helpful, so valuable. Thank you guys for being here. I know you could be doing a lot of things on your Monday night. You can reach out to them, and we've dropped their profiles in the chat, and we've been getting DM'd for them. Tim has a unique coupon code and Keta for working with them on their packages or other services. Chaz is booked, but he does kind of one-off sessions here or there if you want to work with him. We have lots of amazing coaches, but these three are excellent, and definitely recommend you schedule some intro calls and work with them directly. If you have questions, you can sign up for Leland and schedule a call with our team, and make sure you get matched to the right person. We have hundreds of coaches that kind of fit your budget, background, and goals, and want to make sure you're successful. So, but thank you guys for being here. This is so valuable as a panel. Let me pull up the giveaway winner. It is Jack Fleming from the UK. So congrats, Jack. You get a free slot in our boot camp. Thanks for joining. This was so helpful. I'll stick around for about 10 minutes. You're welcome to drop. Panelists, thank you guys for being here. But I'll stick around to answer any questions for anyone that wants to ask questions about the boot camp or other. Thank you, guys.